Good day, and thanks for joining us for a tribute to Dr. M.T. Anderson. I'm your host, Dr. Finnessy J. Fisher, and with me today is our very special guest, Dr. M.T. Anderson, who served as superintendent of Greenville County Schools from 1960 to 1970. During our program, you will get to meet Dr. Anderson and hear some fascinating stories about his career as a principal and superintendent here in Greenville, and more importantly, how he successfully integrated our schools with little or no disruption in 1970. Dr. Anderson, let's start by taking a look at your career in education. What or whom would you say influenced your decision to go into the field of education?
Thank you, Dr. Fisher. When I was in the 5th grade, we had a special teacher, Miss Mary Gregory. And she said, "Welcome to my 5th grade class. I am delighted to have you." And before that first day was over, we knew Miss Gregory was a special person. The year ended. We came back to get our report cards, and at the bottom of the card, it had promoted to 6th grade. And we were telling Miss Gregory how much we enjoyed her and how much we loved her. And after all of that and the goodbyes, she said, "Wait a minute. You know, I'm going to be promoted too. I'm going up to the 6th grade with you." And we clapped our hands with joy and went home for the summer. I moved on to high school, Florence High School. When I went to my algebra class, there was Miss Mary Gregory.
Wow.
I felt like I wasn't exactly prepared to go to college, but I'd always said I was going to Furman. My sophomore year, I was leaning toward the teaching profession. And I had said in my mind somewhere that if I ever chose teaching, I wanted to be a teacher like Miss Gregory. When I finished Furman, I was on a visit to Florence. I went by, and there sat Miss Gregory on her front porch on Palmetto Street. And I spoke to her, and I told her, I said, "I've finished Furman, and I'm going to be a teacher."
What a remarkable story, Dr. Anderson. And certainly that reminds all of us of how important we can be in someone else's life and not even realize that we're doing it at the time. That is just fantastic. Well, tell us a little bit about your career and your first year as a teacher.
I was offered a contract to teach at Boiling Springs in Spartanburg County. They had a little house next to right adjoining the school grounds. And the superintendent and his wife lived in that home. They had extra rooms, and I roomed with my roommate that year was a former Furman student who had been teaching at Boiling Springs, and he had recommended me to Mr. Hester, who was the superintendent. And there were 4 women who lived in that same house. So there were 3 men and 5 women, and the women did most of the talking. But you know, the day before school opened, I walked across into the school building, and I stood behind an old desk that would be mine, and I looked out over those desks screwed to the floor, and I said, tomorrow morning I'll greet my students just like Miss Gregory greeted me. So I was surprised. It was a 10th grade geometry class. And they weren't that much interested in geometry. When I said, you'll make me happy if you learn it, they didn't care whether I was happy or not. And some of them weren't. In April of that year, there was a knock on my door, and one of the boys who was near the door answered the door, and he informed me that the chairman of the Board of Trustees wanted to speak to me. So I went to the door, and he said, the trustees met last night, and we re-elected you for another year. And he walked on. That's all he said. I was a little late getting home for lunch that day. Everybody else was around the table. And when I walked in, I knew that something was wrong by the expression on their faces, and they weren't talking much. Finally, one of the women said, are you going to stay, or are you going to leave? Well, I really didn't know what she meant until she said, did the chairman of the board come to your room today? I said, yes, he asked me to come back. She said, he asked me to leave. Well, that bothered me. It rather upset me. So I thought about it, and the next time I had an opportunity, when I was in Greenville, I made a contact with the superintendent of schools in Westminster, South Carolina, in Oconee County. And he offered me a teaching position in the high school at $110 per month. By the way, I earned $900 at Boiling Springs. Saved enough of that to begin my master's degree at Duke in the summer of 1930. I met my wife that year. I didn't know it at the time that she would be, but I was attracted to her the minute I saw her in the faculty meeting that first year in Westminster. And gradually we knew each other better. Another thing that happened, the elementary principal decided to resign, and that position in Westminster was open. We had 2 teachers for each grade in that elementary school. The superintendent offered it to me, and I accepted it. So for 5 years, I was principal of the Westminster Elementary School. And I taught 6th and 7th grade students in addition to that, and coached midget football and girls basketball. In 1936, a superintendent from Cartersville, Georgia, came to see me, and he said I had been recommended to him through some source, and that he had an elementary school in Cartersville, Georgia. He would like for me to consider that position. I went to Cartersville, Georgia after we had had that interview and looked at the school. It was a new elementary school. Only 6 teachers, plus the principal, who was a teaching principal, who would be a music teacher and a janitor. I was surprised when the day before school, I had been there for a week, and I had talked with the superintendent some about the program, and had talked to the teacher who would teach 6th grade, and we would exchange rooms from time to time as we taught different subjects. And but I was surprised that we didn't have a faculty meeting. I got the teachers together that first afternoon or two after we were settled in for the school year, and I said, what do you all think about that's having, I had a book that that I thought was a very good book for teachers on methods and innovations in elementary grades and so forth. And I was going to ask each one to take a chapter, and we'd meet once a week. No, we can't do that. We've never done that. I wouldn't be able to do that. So I had to do it, but we did it. And we were visiting in Greenville. So my father said, why don't you go by and speak to Dr. J.L. Mann? He was superintendent of schools in Florence when I was in the 7th grade, he said. So my wife was shopping, and I went to Dr. Mann's office, no appointment. And I told him that I just wanted to meet him. And he said, what are you doing? And I told him about that I'd earned my master's degree by then from Duke. And so he said, well, you in elementary education, but the assistant principalship of Greenville High School is open. Would you consider that? Well, I said, I'm under contract in Cartersville, Georgia. He said, they'll release you. Well, I thought about it, but I didn't tell him what I'd do. I filled out the application form, went back to Cartersville. 2 days later, here was a telegram. Dr. Mann, offer you assistant principalship, Greenville High School, $1,500. Let me know immediately. I had to get in the car and come back to Greenville. And I realized that the principal of the high school was Mr. Parkhurst. I had met him at Duke. We had been at Duke. He received his master's from Duke. When he found out that I'd been to see Dr. Mann, he went straight to Dr. Mann and said, I want him. So I was back in Greenville and accepted the job and was released in Cartersville and moved to Greenville. And by the 15th of August, I was over in that big high school building, 1,400 students, 65 teachers. There was a little lady named Ophelia Langston. She was a secretary. She weighed less than 90 pounds. She was crippled with arthritis, but she was a secretary, and she could type slowly, and she could move around. She had a little chair that was wheeled on the bottom, and she moved around. She took care of all the files and the records, answered the telephone. She knew everything about Greenville High. Miss Langston sent me a message saying that Dr. Mann wanted to talk with me. Well, it scared me to death. I thought, what have I done? So I went across the street to his office, and he invited me in. He called me Thomas. He said, Thomas, I've got some good news, and I've got some bad news. I said, give me the bad news first. He said, Mr. Parkhurst is ill, and he may be in and out quite a bit. I just want to tell you, the good news is that when he's not there, you are the principal. Well, I was really, I was in shock. Went back across the street straight to Miss Langston. I said, Miss Langston, you know Mr. Parkhurst may be out for a while? Well, she knew a little bit about it, but not that much. I said, well, Dr. Mann said when he wasn't here, I would be the principal. And I said, I just don't know about that. She said, don't worry about it. We'll do it together. There were teachers in that school who were teaching there the year I was born. I was 29 years old. Some of them had been there 30 years or more. So I just felt completely inadequate. I'd always felt that when I was at Westminster and Boiling Springs, Cartersville, I always felt I was a little bit too big for the job, you know. But back in those days, we would gradually go up. Well, I went up in a hurry. And here I was with all that responsibility. Miss Langston, she'd get me in there every day. And then I knew that she was not only talking to me, she was talking to teachers and even the coach, Speedy Spear. Everybody remembers Speedy Spear if you've been in Greenville very long. He'd been the coach there for 25 or 30 years already. The old Speedy came up to the office and he said, I heard that Mr. Parkhurst was ill. And he said, you can count on me. If any of those football boys give you any trouble, you just let me know. So I knew I had a friend in Speedy. And teachers, some of the older teachers came in and they surrounded me with their support. So I got through that year, but we were in the old building. We were going to the new building on Border Street, all under one roof, that beautiful high school building. $500,000 it cost. Could you build one for that today?
No way.
Couldn't build an elementary. You probably couldn't add 2 rooms for that. Anyway, we made the master schedule. Miss Langston and I made it. And that's the year that Dr. Loggins came back. He was coming back as assistant superintendent to Dr. Mann, who had planned to retire June the 30th, 1940. This, you see, was 38. I became principal of Greenville High July 1st, 1940. And that was quite an honor. I didn't realize how good Greenville High was until people began to come. They wanted to see that new building, for one thing. Everything under one roof, vocational department, everything that you could ask for. But the front of that building is exactly like it was when we moved into it in 1938. I could tell you many things about Greenville High. One of the things that I enjoyed most was moving around among the students. I had found out long ago that students don't respect you because you're the principal. They respect you because of who you are as a person. And I found out that I had to be fair and honest and had to deal with them with integrity and with compassion. I'd say at the beginning of the year with the new students, when you meet me in the hall, you tell me your name. You don't know my name, but you tell me yours. The next time I see you, I'll try to call you by name. So I would mingle with them on a day like this before the bell rang. One day I was outside and the bell rang and they all went in. And I went back to my office and I remembered a little piece that I had read in a book. I can't even remember the title of the book. And the question was, are these just children on the way to school again? And of course the answer was no. These are the world's rebuilders. They must bring order to chaos, comfort to pain, sunshine to blasted fields. And I went back to as I was sitting there at my desk, I said, no wonder the poet wrote, the soul of a child is the loveliest flower in the garden of God. I wanted the teachers to feel at ease about regulations and rules and so forth. So I said, let's organize a high school council. We'll elect 12 teachers. Faculty will elect them. I didn't appoint them. They elected 12 teachers. They composed the high school council. And they had a chairman. And they met every 2 weeks. And they talked about the problems we had. I felt that was a way to let the faculty know that I wanted their input. One of the things that I enjoyed more than anything else was talking to the students. I would make a little talk, and then I'd come down, stand on the floor, and in that little auditorium, it seats 620 people, and it would be full of students. And I'd say, now, I want everybody to look me right straight in the eye. Everybody is looking me in the eye, and I'm looking you in the eye. I want to tell you something. And I'd always come up with something like this. We are citizens of Greenville High, and we represent Greenville High wherever we go. Whether you out driving your car, whether you at a football game, wherever you are a representative of Greenville High. And we want people to know that we are a great school. I was on the faculty of the summer school at the University of South Carolina that summer, 1944. The State Department of Education and the State Board of Education and the legislature, they'd all decided we need a 12th grade. Then somebody realized, well, you just can't put the 12th grade on top of the 11th and just move without any, it involves everybody. So they said, well, we need to have a study. So the study had to do with how can we make the transition from the 11-year system to the 12-year system. So I presided over that group. That was my responsibility that summer. So I hit on the idea, well, why don't we have a graduating class at Greenville High in 1948 when nobody else would have it. So I asked for volunteers. How many in the student body will be willing? They must have been sophomores, junior, freshmen, sophomores at that time. How many of you would like to be in this group that will graduate in 1948? So we had 75 in the class. It's the only class that graduated in the high school, in that auditorium.
Dr. Anderson, you have touched so many lives in such a positive way. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the successful integration of schools in 1970.
Hi, I'm Laura Jean Reed, Greenville County Teacher of the Year. As an educator, I've dedicated my career to ensuring that every child has opportunities to excel. In Greenville County, almost 98% of our teachers have earned the status of highly qualified, as defined by the federal No Child Left Behind Act. Highly qualified means that we're experts in the areas in which we teach. My area is music. Greenville County is a leader in teacher quality too. We have about 400 teachers meeting the rigorous standards of National Board Certification. As a matter of fact, we have more nationally board certified teachers in Greenville County alone than 30 other states have individually. High quality teachers lead to improved student achievement, and we're proving that in Greenville County schools.
Our students are achieving success as evidenced by college scholarships received by our seniors. The class of 2007 earning a record $76.6 million, and the scholarship totals continue to increase every year. In fact, our students have earned more than $317 million in scholarships over the past 5 years. In South Carolina and across the nation, our students are attending prestigious colleges and universities like Clemson, South Carolina, Georgia Tech, MIT, and Rutgers, just to name a few. Increased academic rigor leads to improved student achievement. We're proving it in Greenville County schools.
Welcome back. We're here with Dr. M.T. Anderson, who served as Greenville County School Superintendent from 1960 until 1970. Dr. Anderson, you accomplished much during your time as superintendent, including the very successful desegregation of our school district over a weekend in February 1970. As someone said, the eyes of the nation were upon Greenville County. How did you involve the community to implement a successful, peaceful integration of schools?
I talked about what was right to do about it. It was right to do it, and we were ordered to do it, and we would do it. I'd been doing that for 2 or 3 years. Then when the order came down, our director of public education, Clelia Hendricks, had an idea about how we could answer questions. We added 5 telephones, had a different number, not all 5, but the same number, but there were 5 they could answer 5 people could talk at once. And she brought in volunteers from the community as she selected them to come in, about 40 people, men and women, who were willing to be acquainted with what these questions were and the answers. And they would answer those phones from 9 to 5 every day in shifts. And if they couldn't answer the question, we asked that they write the question down, take the person's phone number and address, and we would notify them. There was Dr. Harrell's committee of 20. This committee of 20 was made up, it was an interracial committee, several prominent black citizens and some white citizens, men and women. They would gather all the information that they had, including what we'd found out on the telephone. And then we'd make a statement to the press. And we didn't have anything to cover up. I said, let's tell everybody the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
That's right.
And that's what we did. And I think that had a great deal to do with the success. You see, the Greenville News and the television stations and the radio stations were all making every effort they could to make this a success. The Chamber of Commerce and many prominent citizens and prominent groups of people in the county went on record as supporting the school system. And one prominent citizen, I remember, said that he didn't know exactly where his child would be placed, but his child would stay in the public schools wherever he was placed.
Wonderful.
And that, you see, we had several people to make such statements live on television or radio, wherever we could get them to do. We were on prime time television. It was WFBC then, still WFBC. And they gave us an hour. And I made an opening statement just stating what we hoped to do. We had the transportation director. He made a statement about buses and stops and changes and so forth. And we had personnel represented. So many teachers and students had to be moved. And then we had instruction, curriculum. Many people had raised the question, well, how's that going to affect the curriculum in the total school district? And he tried to assure them that it would go just as it had been going, and we would try to make it better. And then that's when I made the statement that the eyes of the nation are upon us. Let's show the people of the nation that we can do this with dignity and with compassion in our hearts. And they did it. We did it.
It's been such a pleasure talking with you today, Dr. Anderson. I hope your 100th birthday is a very special day and you are able to share it with loved ones and friends. Thank you for watching as Greenville County Schools pays tribute to Dr. M.T. Anderson.
I would like to make a statement in favor of public education. I should like to call on the citizens of Greenville County to support public education, to support the school board, and to support Dr. Fisher as she leads our school district.